Well, good morning, everybody. I'm hoping everyone's all logged in, and welcome to another Toolbox talk with the Australian Men's Shed Association. We're talking about hearing in the shed today, and we've got clinical lead for Soundfair Australia, Melissa Chandler, here with us this morning. But before we get there, and before we say hi to Melissa, I'd like to point out a new feature for you. If you can't see our voices in text form at the bottom of your screen, if you move your mouse down at the bottom of your screen, it should say live transcript. If you hit that button, you will be able to start seeing what we're saying in text form so everybody can read and join in, whether you've got a hearing problem or not. And we think this is an absolute fascinating addition to our webinars going forward, and we look forward to using them more and being able to give accessibility to as many people as possible. Good morning, Melissa. How are you?
Good morning, Stuart and everyone. I'm really well, thank you. And thank you so much for incorporating captions as standard. It's super exciting.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. This is a fabulous feature that I think will really do us proud in regards to reaching out to more and more people. Absolutely. And as they become aware that we actually are using it, hopefully more and more people will come and listen to what we have to say. So here we are, Melissa. We're talking about Soundfair Australia. Who is Soundfair? What's Soundfair all about? Tell us how it got started. Give us a little bit of information.
Love to. Yeah, it's an interesting story, actually. So we're on the verge of celebrating our 90th birthday this year. And in fact, we were started by a group of people living with hearing conditions who were looking for a sense of connection, looking to meet with people who got it, who understood, what life was like to live with a hearing condition, and wanted a place where they could feel supported and included, maybe learn some skills. And so they decided to put together a bit of a club called the Victorian Lip Readers Club. And that was back in 1932. And that club then grew in the 40s to become the Victorian branch of Better Hearing Australia. And we were Better Hearing Australia Victoria for many, many years, continuing that focus on inclusion and advocacy and support for people with hearing conditions. And then a couple of years ago, we had another rebrand and became Soundfair. And so today, I guess Soundfair sort of has three main pillars to our bow, but everything is driven by the voices of those living with hearing conditions. So, we are strong advocates for people living with hearing conditions to government to create essentially a fair world for everyone living with hearing conditions. And our focus is on hearing wellbeing and equality. So in addition to our advocacy work and support, we also have an education arm, both focusing on professional education and consumer education, as well as direct service provision, where we're providing hearing wellbeing services with a real focus on people as what we like to say as whole people. And so we have a couple of hashtags that we like to play with, which is more than just ears and more than just devices, because we really feel that, people living with hearing conditions are more than just ears.
Absolutely. Melissa, you've really struck a chord with me in regards to when you first contacted the Australian Men's Shed Association. I remember thinking, oh, well, here's another hearing organisation. We already have a fabulous partnership with Hearing Australia. They come out to all our events and do hearing tests and guide people. But then you filled me in on Soundfair's broader spectrum, and I could see the need for different outlooks in regards to this space. what are some of the other things that we can do to make, for instance, a shed a more welcoming place for people with maybe hearing loss, sight issues. I was looking at some YouTube, and there's a guy that actually does wood turning, and he's blind and deaf.
Yeah.
And yet he can operate a machine and do these amazing wood turning pieces all by the feel. And I went, well, why can't we include these people into our environment?
And of course you can. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's interesting because I guess when someone has a particular condition, and you'll notice we talk about hearing conditions, not just hearing loss, because there can be lots of things that stem from ear-related problems, but our focus is more on the impacts. And so you know, when we think about people who are living with specific conditions, we often think that it's a problem that they need to address. You know, we take a very medical focus, I suppose, and, you know, think, oh, well, if someone has a hearing loss, then, you know, they need to go and get hearing aids and, you know, sort of be responsible for that, that issue. And yet we take a little bit of a different view on that, and I guess look at it more from the lens of the social model of disability, where, you know, there's so many things that others can do to create an inclusive environment that makes it easier for someone with hearing conditions to thrive and to live well. And, you know, I think just, you know, seeing what we're doing today, including the captions, is a huge step and a great step to being more inclusive. And I know it might seem tricky in the shared environment, I guess, because, you know, there's a lot of noise, you know, big open spaces, and the physical environment can often be one of the areas that, you know, a lot of change is needed in order to be inclusive, because, you know, if we've got heavy machinery, it's obviously creating a lot of noise. If we've got big open spaces with hard surfaces, that creates a lot of reverberation, which adds to the background noise and all of these things. I mean, you know, anyone with a hearing condition will tell you that, you know, background noise and competing noises are one of the biggest challenges to successful communication. So, you know, anything that can be done to help to mitigate those noises in the environment can be helpful. But then it's also about, I think, having a look at, you know, the visual side of communication as well. You know, we've all, I think, experienced of late the limitation to our communication when we take away that visual cue, when we've been wearing masks. You know, all of a sudden we put masks on, and then everyone's like, oh, I'm sorry, what'd you say? and we haven't realized, you know, more than we have now, just how much we incorporate what we see into our ability to communicate. And, you know, creating situations where, you know, if you're trying to teach someone a new skill perhaps, or get someone involved, making sure that that visual side is emphasized as well. So can people see the face of the person that's actually giving the instruction? Are there perhaps some dot point steps that could be, you know, put beside a piece of equipment that sort of say, these are the key things you need to do, so that they can read that as well? Perhaps there's something that could be read in advance. You know, can material be disseminated? Yeah.
Melissa, you're blowing my mind, because, you know, you mean to say there's more things than just raising your voice?
Oh, indeed. In fact, raising your voice is one of the worst things you can do.
Is that right? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Again, it comes back to that visual thing. You know, when we raise our voice, we often distort our faces. And so just being able to speak with a normal flow and a natural presentation is actually better than trying to raise your voice.
Yeah. So Melissa, you mentioned the mask wearing, and I must admit, now thinking about it, I must rely a little bit on lip reading myself. You know, while I'm actually, because I could barely hear people when they were talking to me with a mask on, and I'm thinking this mask is muffling the sound. And now I think about it, I think you're right. I actually watch people's lips as they speak to me, and I take as much out of that as I do. My apologies, I've left my phone on. Oh, crikey, I'll turn that off. I owe everybody a beer. Shed rules.
Excellent.
But Melissa, look, I did look at your website and I was fascinated by the following statement. We want to create urban work and personal environments that allow fair sound accessibilities for those with hearing conditions, recognizing that the effect has on them individually and those around them. We want to be the go-to network who will help the underserved navigate through life's hurdles, instilling a sense of belonging within their community, socially, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and culturally. Soundfair? Now, besides the Soundfair bar at the end, which I must admit raised a smile, because I can see the play on words there. This is a big statement. Can you tell me a bit more about that sense of belonging and how hearing fits into that sense of belonging?
It's massive, isn't it? It is a huge statement. And I guess there's three sort of key elements to that statement, all underpinned by that sense of inclusion and belonging that you refer to. Firstly, it's about that accessibility piece that we were talking about earlier. You know, hearing conditions really are known for their invisibility. You know, we don't see them, but there is so much that others and society can do to help with that sense of inclusion. You know, there's a lot of stigma that exists around hearing conditions and even taking action to address hearing conditions, you know, with the use of hearing aids, etc. There's a lot of misinformation and lack of understanding around what can be done to help people with hearing conditions. Tinnitus, for example, is a great example there, where, you know, a lot of people unfortunately are told, oh, you've got tinnitus, there's nothing you can do. Well,
so
there are
can you explain what tinnitus is?
So tinnitus
that's a squealing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically the term for any sort of noises that you hear in your ears or in your head that aren't externally generated. So it's a noise you're experiencing, but other people aren't. And it's incredibly common, and particularly when you do have hearing loss, they sort of do tend to go hand in hand. And, you know, look, unfortunately, there isn't a cure per se for tinnitus, but there are a lot of things that can be done to ensure that you can still live a full and exciting life with your tinnitus. It doesn't have to be, you know, it's not that nothing can be done, and it can be a little frustrating to hear that routinely.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. You know, things like captions we talked about are another great accessibility option that could just be routine with every meeting, and we're often so much more reliant on video meetings now, which is great. But I think also, you know, we're not taught to be inclusive when it comes to hearing conditions. We live in a world that assumes everyone can hear. And so, you know, environments aren't designed with hearing conditions in mind. You know, it's physical accessibility is mandated and so important now in new construction, etc. But we don't really have the same requirements from an acoustic perspective. And there can be changes like that can make the world of difference and make what we would call a hearing friendly space, as opposed to sort of increasing the challenge for people with hearing conditions. So, I mean, essentially, there's just lots of things that everyone can do to make the world a more inclusive and accessible place for people living with hearing conditions. But there's two more things to that statement, because it is massive. One is also about looking at the hearing sector itself. And, you know, it's been around for a long time. There are so many places you can go and get your hearing tested and talk about solutions to help you with a hearing condition. But as we talked about earlier, they do tend to be a little focused on one solution, being hearing aids. And hearing aids are fabulous. The technology is great. But we know from listening to people living with hearing conditions that that's not the full story when it comes to having a full life and living with a hearing condition. And so, you know, there is more that we as a hearing sector can do as well to really address the impacts that living with a hearing condition can have, you know, whether it's social impacts, whether it's relationships, whether it's employment, you know, possibilities, maintaining employment, you know, just being able to do hobbies, you know, join clubs, you know, having the confidence to do those sorts of things. It's quite a holistic approach that I think we could be taking as a sector that we haven't done. And you know, we're working towards that. And the last piece is the underserved and the vulnerable. It's quite shocking, I think, to think that there are people living in Australia that cannot access the hearing healthcare that they need. You know, accessing hearing healthcare can be quite a costly exercise, and some groups are funded, which is fabulous, but there is still a significant cohort of Australians who don't receive or can't access any funding for hearing services, being, you know, people who are seeking refuge or asylum, or even just people on low incomes, you know, can't always access the care they need. And so that's another area that we're trying to address with our services too. We have a hearing bank where we provide low or no cost hearing services. And so essentially any income that we receive through donations or philanthropy or through our hearing clinic goes towards supporting that program, which is really important. And we'd love to see that gap, you know, filled more broadly
absolutely
as well. Yeah.
But also what you've just said, it sort of makes it beholden upon us as a community to be more embracive, to be welcoming, to actually think outside the box. And I was thinking of this from the shed perspective. I go into sheds and the call to morning tea or lunch is usually a rattle or a horn or something loud and audible. But for those with hearing loss, that's not really going to ring any bells or get their attention, if I can put it that way.
Yes.
So in that regard, I'm thinking to myself, well, what else could we do? And I'm sure there's a lot of sheds with techie type people, electricians and the like, that maybe could set up an LED lighting system.
Yeah.
You know, someone flicks a switch and certain lights go on, saying and advising people of different things. The red light goes on, it means stop the machines, there's an emergency. A green light means, hey, come and have something to eat. An orange light means, hang on, we have an announcement to make, or something like that, like a stop-go sign type thing for each area of the machine that gives a visual cue that something is happening and going on. But also just being aware of someone else's difficulties, and being able to come alongside them and say, Joe's still on the machine, we've been called to morning tea, and just tapping him on the shoulder.
Yes.
And, you know, being inclusive and saying, come on, Joe, let's go and have morning tea.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I think these are all fabulous ideas, Stuart. And they don't all have to be really hard to implement. Like you said, sometimes it's just having that awareness that, oh, if there has been an audible signal, maybe not everyone's actually picked that up. And so, as you say, tap on the shoulder, you know, making people aware, oh, we're moving to this different activity now, just so that people don't get left behind. But yeah, I love your ideas around the different colored lights, etc. You know, there's lots of ways that you could have a flashing, even just the whole lights in the place could flash on and off. You know, someone could flick, someone's job while they're ringing a bell could be to flick the switch.
So in that regard, there's other things that come to mind, like if you know someone has difficulties hearing, finding a quiet space to go and have a conversation. But I've often been told that there's a thing called a hearing loop. What's a hearing loop? What's that all about?
It sounds a little strange, doesn't it? A hearing loop essentially is a device that you find often in places like theatres, anywhere there's a public address system like train stations, and essentially they transmit a signal which can be picked up by people who are wearing hearing aids that have what's called a telecoil or a T-switch on their device. So it usually requires someone to switch to a particular setting on their hearing aid to actually pick up this signal. And essentially the loop connects to a microphone or, as I said, a public address system. So in a situation like a shed, you know, if you were making an announcement or having a meeting or presentation of some sort, whoever's using the PA system could be connected to a loop. And anyone wearing hearing aids could then switch to that particular setting to access that signal directly to their hearing aids.
Yeah.
And loops have been around for a very, very long time. It's induction technology, and it's starting to get a little bit out of vogue, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm behind the A-frame. Okay,
they
sorry.
They still exist. But with technology and hearing aids evolving, and you know, particularly wireless technology, you know, there's now a lot of Bluetooth systems and radio systems as well. So there's other public address systems like sound field amplification systems that can be used as well, that can perform a similar role but actually impact everyone in the group, not just the people wearing hearing aids and having access to that T switch. So they can be really good for those sorts of situations. The microphone on them will actually reduce the background noise that it's picking up. So it's processing the sound, but also just elevate the signal that the speaker is actually using above that background noise level, so that everyone has that advantage. And yeah, Bluetooth transmission has come a long way, and most hearing aids these days also have Bluetooth technology where they can, you know, have television stream to their hearing aids, telephone devices stream direct to hearing aids. Yeah, there's a lot of different options when it comes to accessing sound and devices now.
So you guys, I know, are down in Victoria.
Yes.
You came out to Hayfield Men's Health event. That was absolutely fantastic.
Yep.
I must admit, I missed the memo that says Dr. Caitlin Bowd, who was coming, is actually your CEO. So I hope I didn't offend.
Not at all.
I should have been a little more, you know, involved.
Not at all.
It wasn't until but she's such a lovely person.
Exactly. Yeah.
In that regard, and just due to the conversation we've just had, who would sheds talk to in regards to having a look at some of these technologies, maybe getting someone into the shed? Would that be a hearing specialist, Hearing Australia, yourselves?
Yeah. Look, we'd suggest talking to your local audiologist. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of information online nowadays, and of course, I could direct people to the Soundfair website. And you know, with video technology, you know, we can do consultations across Australia now. It doesn't necessarily need to be, you know, no one needs to get on a plane and come to Melbourne, but we would definitely suggest having a chat to a local hearing care professional. We've got a sheet on our website actually that talks about how to choose an audiologist, for example, what sort of questions to ask, because we do know that relationship that you build with an audiologist is one of the biggest determinants of a successful outcome when it comes to you know, managing your hearing condition and learning to live well with your hearing condition. So yeah, audiologists are experts in these areas. There are other companies though too that deal specifically with assistive listening devices and other sorts of technology. You know, there really is a lot of technology out there that can be used. But if it's more than that, you know, if it's more about, well, yeah, you know, the technology's there and that's working for me, but you know, I still feel like something's missing. That's where a chat with Soundfair could be really helpful, and we're happy to do that via telehealth, and yeah, help you work through those concerns and get you living your best life, basically.
Excellent, Melissa. That's a fantastic service that you provide, and I think it would be valuable for any shed to actually get in contact and have that conversation about what they can do to make their shed more inclusive of people with a hearing loss. And how to make the shed open up. We're all getting older, and we're all diminishing in one way or other. The eyes are going, the ears are going. You know, some of us need a walking frame, and we shouldn't be excluded just because of those little things that pop up in our lives and make life a little more difficult.
Yeah.
We should be actually making life a little more welcoming and open and accepting.
Yeah.
Melissa, thank you very much for spending this time this morning on the Toolbox Talk, hearing in
pleasure.
the shed.
Thank you so much for having
good fun
me.
to chat, and we thank everyone else for tuning in. And if you're watching it at a later stage and you have any questions, please contact Soundfair. Contact myself at head office in AMSA, and I'll connect you to your local service. All right, you guys have fun, and we'll catch everybody on the next Toolbox Talk. Thanks, Melissa. Take care.
Thanks, guys. You too.